I just want to get some dope and get the fuck out of here.
In America, the consumption of drugs has always been an activity that countercultures and communities, both criminal and non-criminal, have participated in. Legislation created against various substances throughout the years have historically been used to oppress minority and countercultural communities, although some in these communities have flourished by using the criminalization to gain both wealth and power. In the mid-19th century, many Chinese immigrants came to the U.S., especially in the West. They brought with them an opium smoking habit that soon caught on with the white population, leading many to accuse Chinese opium den owners of corrupting white youth. Although opium use was common among middle-class and older whites, even being prescribed by doctors, the smoking of opium in Chinese opium dens was seen as particularly sinful due to the interracial nature of the habit. This led to one of the first anti-drug laws in America, when a San Francisco ordinance banned opium dens. Other states soon followed suit, with Idaho being more particular about how every white person who ran or patronized an opium den would be guilty of a misdemeanor. Around the same time, cocaine was banned, as it was believed to make black men act violent towards the white population. Opium and cocaine were both prohibited using the Harrison Tax Act of 1914. In 1918, the 18th Amendment to the Constitution passed, creating an era of alcohol prohibition and the first war on drugs with its own dedicated police force. This drug war may have been even more of a failure than the current one, with alcohol remaining so prominent that when the famed prohibition agent Izzy Einstein went to New Orleans to find alcohol-serving establishments called speakeasies, it only took him 35 seconds to find a drink. When Izzy asked his taxi driver where he could buy some liquor, his driver offered to sell him a bottle from under the seat. Prohibition caused a new group of Americans to gain power and wealth. Before Prohibition, small ethnicity-based gangs made their money by running gambling and prostitution rings. After Prohibition passed, the massive profits from bootlegging transformed these small gangs into organized syndicates, who bootlegged in huge quantities, bribed officials, worked together, and killed each other. The most prolific and powerful of these groups were the various Italian mobs that sprung up across the nation, leading to ruthless mob bosses like Charles Lucky Luciano and Al Capone both becoming multi-millionaires during Prohibition, with Capone at one point raking in $100 million a year, which is more than $1 billion in today's dollars. In 1930, the Federal Bureau of Narcotics was created, with prohibitionist Harry Anslinger put at the helm as its commissioner. One of its first orders of business was to enforce the ban of cocaine and opium. Soon, however, its focus shifted onto banning marijuana federally. Marijuana was very popular with the Mexican-American and Mexican immigrant communities in the U.S. and was catching on with other Americans as well. Marijuana was banned in a few states, with the state legislature hoping that the ban would get rid of the immigrants who were competing with whites for work. Newspapers and movies during this time portrayed people who smoked as violent, lust-filled degenerates. One of these sensationalist films, Reefer Madness, is so ridiculous that it keeps getting satirized and referenced almost a century later. The fear-mongering worked, and the Marijuana Tax Act was passed in 1937 by Congress members that only knew of the medicinal name cannabis and were unfamiliar with the term marijuana. The very next day in Denver, Colorado, the law claimed its first victims, a 57-year-old laborer and the Mexican worker that he had sold weed to. 57-year-old Caldwell was sentenced to 4 years of hard labor in Leavenworth and died shortly after his release. Today, he is remembered as one of the first casualties in the war on marijuana. Around this same time, the beatniks, along with the jazz musicians that they listened to, created some of the best creative works of the early 20th century while doing a lot of drugs. Louis Armstrong was fond of marijuana, actually becoming the first celebrity arrested in a drug bust, while many of his contemporaries took bennies and amphetamine, as well as heroin. The Beats also loved these drugs, seeing them as gateways to creativity that helped in their writing. Jack Kerouac credited marijuana and speed for helping him write, and William S. Burroughs' time as a heroin addict gave him insights into a dark drug culture that appears in his novels A Naked Lunch and Junkie. Allen Ginsberg, the beat poet who wrote Howl, would go on to advocate the use of LSD. The Beat generation's bohemian lifestyle and fascination with Eastern religion would evolve into the hippie movement of the 1960s and would inspire writers such as Hunter S. Thompson and Ken Kesey. From the 1950s to the early 60s, the CIA did experiments to see if mind control was possible through the use of LSD. Some of these experiments tortured prisoners with electroshock therapy while they were under the influence of high amounts of LSD, while others were more innocent, using university students and other citizens. It was in these experiments that Timothy Leary, Robert Hunter of the Grateful Dead, Allen Ginsberg, and Ken Kesey of the Merry Pranksters were introduced to LSD. Kesey liked the drug so much he started working at the hospital that the experiments took place at in order to steal the acid and supply his friends with it. His job at the hospital eventually led to his novel, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Not all of the experiments had as nice of an impact as it had with the leaders of the hippie movement. The American crime boss, Whitey Bulger, was given LSD every day for more than a year in an attempt to make him lose his mind. Another subject in the experiments was Ted Kaczynski, who would then go on to make a name for himself as the anarcho-primitivist Unabomber, although it is unknown whether he was subjected to LSD during his time.
Turn on, tune in, drop out.
During the 1960s, the hippie movement exploded onto the scene. Fueled by drugs, music, free love, and peace politics, the hippies' popularity skyrocketed to the hundreds of thousands during the Vietnam War. The main group that managed to whet the psychedelic drug appetite of this new counterculture was called the Brotherhood of Eternal Love, which specialized in LSD and weed, and was founded after petty criminals took acid and renounced their violent ways. The Brotherhood never aimed to make money. Rather, they aimed to make a whole new society based on their ideals. Through smuggling Afghan Kush and hollowed-out surfboards, they raised funds to distribute orange sunshine acid, with a goal to eventually distribute 100 million doses. The Brotherhood was extremely influential in both culture and politics. Timothy Leary, a psychologist and leader in the psychedelic culture of the time, was a member and was broken out of jail through the help of the Brotherhood and their connections with the Black Panthers. The Brotherhood also managed to film the last concert of Jimi Hendrix in Hawaii, where they also became responsible for the name of the strain Maui Wowie. The peace-loving hippies and the political black Americans caused much headache for the president at the time, Richard Nixon. Unluckily for everyone, he came up with a tried and true solution to deal with these dissidents: another war on drugs.
America's public enemy number one in the United States is drug abuse. In order to fight and defeat this enemy, it is necessary to wage a new all-out offensive.
The reasoning for this new war can be seen from this quote from one of his most trusted advisors, John L. Richmond. It was June 1971 when the new legislation took place, causing decades of pain that still ache today. Many Americans enriched themselves in the black market once again. The Hells Angels, who were once fond of taking acid with Ken Kesey and the Grateful Dead, started producing meth in huge amounts and selling it around the country. In the 1980s, gangs in LA were supplied with cocaine by the South American right-wing rebels called the Contras under the tutelage of the CIA. Drug lords like Freeway Rick made millions selling crack in black communities.
At our heyday, as much as maybe $1 million a day, $2 million a day sometimes, maybe more, a few days.
And paid the consequences of doing so, while the leaders of the Contras got away scot-free. The war on drugs started by Nixon, and then made worse by other presidents' punitive justice policies, has caused the ruin of many American lives. The black markets created by the laws created narco-states in South America, as well as drugs cut with fentanyl, tranq, or other chemicals with much worse side effects than the original drug. All of these deadly problems are based on known lies made more than 50 years ago.